God has already seen what you have yet to realize. People are leaving your path. Opportunities are closing. Situations are changing abruptly. It's not a coincidence. It's a blessing. You may not understand right now. You might even feel like you're losing something important. But listen, if God is removing it, it was not meant to stay. There are intentions that you can't see. There are words spoken behind your back that you haven't heard. There are traps being dismantled without you having to do anything. Accept this warning. Don't insist on what God has already decided to remove. What seems like a loss today is protection for what is to come. Are you feeling the impact of this removal? Perhaps you've noticed that some people have started to distance themselves, that doors that once seemed open are now closed, and that certain situations simply don't resolve, don't progress, don't thrive. This isn't a mistake. It isn't a punishment. It's a necessary cut. God doesn't reveal everything at once, but He gives signs. The problem is, many times you refuse to see them. You cling to what you should have already let go of, trying to hold on to bonds that have already been severed in the heavens, trying to revive something that has lost its purpose. But listen, don't fight against what God has already decided to remove. Fake people don't announce that they are fake. Bad intentions aren't written across anyone's forehead. Many times you only realize when it's already too late. But God doesn't need to wait for things to happen to act. He anticipates. He cuts before the damage becomes irreparable. He removes before the betrayal occurs. And you know what happens when you don't accept this removal? You start to carry burdens that aren't yours. You begin to feel an exhaustion that you can't trace back to its source. Because you are holding on to what you should have already let go of. You are making space for those who don't deserve to be by your side. Now pause and reflect. Do you feel like some relationships suddenly became strange? Have you noticed that some people have simply distanced themselves without any apparent reason? Doors that seemed certain have been closed without explanation. This isn't just a coincidence. This is a response. What you need to understand is that God doesn't explain the reasons for your deliverance at the moment it happens. He acts, and only later, with time, do you realize the extent of the protection you received. The truth is harsh. Some people approached you out of self-interest, not out of love. There are those who smiled at you but spoke against you as soon as you turned your back. Some relationships looked genuine, but they were draining your energy, undermining your faith, and holding back your journey. And God saw, God heard, God decided to remove those influences, but will you accept it? Or will you insist on what should have already left your life? Often the greatest resistance comes from the fear of loneliness. You think, what if I end up alone? What if I need this person later? What if I'm being unfair? But what you don't realize is that holding on to what God has already removed doesn't provide security. It only hinders your life. You weren't called to carry unnecessary burdens. You don't need friendships that only drain you. You don't have to stay in environments that don't empower you. Now, a sincere question, will you trust or will you resist? What God removes, He replaces. What He cuts away, He renews. What He closes, He opens in a much greater way. So, stop trying to retrieve what's already left your path. Trust. God is clearing your way for something much greater. You need to understand something fundamental. What God removes, He does not bring back. If something has left your life, don't try to pull it back. Don't deceive yourself into thinking it was a mistake, that perhaps you should have done something differently. God doesn't make mistakes. He doesn't cut ties for no reason. He doesn't close doors without cause. The question is, how long will you insist on what has already died? There are people who have left your life, but you still carry them in your memory, in your conversations, in your heart. You still cling to the idea that maybe they'll come back, that maybe everything will be okay again. But listen, God does not undo what He has removed. You might feel confused right now, but at some point, you will look back and be grateful. You will realize what was hidden behind what seemed so perfect. You will see the hidden intentions, the disguised glances, the venomous words that never reached your ears. And then you will understand the separation was the greatest deliverance you could have received. The danger of insistence. If God has taken something away and you insist on holding on, do you know what happens? You become vulnerable to attacks that should never have touched you. You get stuck in cycles that wear you down, but don't help you grow. You allow the wrong people access to your heart. Have you ever wondered how many opportunities you've missed by clinging to something you should have let go of? How many doors did God want to open, but you were too busy holding on to what He had already closed? The pain of separation is temporary, but the consequences of ignoring a divine warning can last for years. The signs, "You can't ignore God," doesn't shout. He whispers. And if you're not paying attention, you might miss the signs and keep insisting on what should have been left behind. Pay attention to the signs. Relationships that used to feel light start to weigh you down. You feel emotional exhaustion. You sense that the energy has changed, that something isn't right. The truth starts to emerge gradually. You discover conversations, behaviors, lies that you hadn't noticed before. The connection cools off for no apparent reason. You try to get closer. You try to reignite the spark, but it seems like something invisible is pushing you apart. You feel peace when that person or situation pulls away. Deep down, you know it no longer makes sense, but you're afraid to accept it. If any of these signs are happening in your life right now, don't ignore them. This is not a coincidence. When God wants to remove, He allows exposure. God never takes something away from your life without first showing you why. He exposes, He reveals, He lets you see what was previously hidden. And when this happens, you have two choices. Accept and move forward, trusting in God's protection. Ignore and remain stuck in something that will only wear you down even more. What do you choose? The exchange that God is preparing for you. Do you feel like you've lost something important? That the absence of certain people or situations has left a void? Maybe this is happening because you haven't understood what comes next. God never removes without having something better to place in its stead, but He can only give you something new if your hands are free. So now, tell me, are your hands free, or are they still holding on to what should have already been let go? The future that God is preparing for you does not include people who are not loyal, places that drain your peace, or connections that hold you back. So let go, accept, trust. You need to let go to receive the new. If your hands are still holding on to what God has already removed, then you are closing the door to what He wants to give you. You say you trust in God, but you still fear being alone. You pray for direction, but you insist on staying where there is no longer purpose. So now be honest with yourself. What still holds you back? Is it the fear of moving forward alone? Is it the illusion that that person will change someday? Is it the attachment to a past that no longer exists? How many times has God shown you that it's not meant for you, yet you still insist? You get disappointed repeatedly and still try to justify it. You feel the pain of ungratefulness but try to overlook it. You notice that there's no more connection, but you insist on holding on. And in the meantime, your blessing is stuck. Your growth is delayed. Your future is waiting for you, but you're too busy looking back. The resistance that keeps you stuck. Do you know why it's so hard to accept what God is removing? Because your mind creates stories. You romanticize the connections, ignore the signs, pretend not to see the cracks that have been there for a long time. You cling to the potential of something that was never real. But listen, if it was meant to stay, it would have worked out. If it was meant to last, there wouldn't be constant pain. It's not that God is punishing you. He is freeing you. He is taking something small to give you something much greater. But you need to make a decision. If you keep insisting, God will allow it. He won't force you to let go. But you will remain stuck in cycles that lead nowhere. You will keep repeating the same pains, feeling the same frustration, wasting time with those who don't deserve to be by your side. So again, what do you choose? The peace that comes after letting go. At first, it hurts. You feel lost, you miss it, you question if you made the right choice. But then, something changes. You begin to notice that your mind feels lighter, that your energy is returning, that your life is organizing itself in an inexplicable way. And then you understand it was God all along. He needed to remove things so you could grow. He had to clear the path for new blessings to arrive. And now I ask you, do you still feel like you lost something, or do you finally understand that you were protected? You may not have all the answers right now, but down the road, when you look back, you will realize that this was the greatest gift God could give you. Now that you're starting to see that you were protected, that the distancing wasn't a punishment but a liberation. The question arises, what now? What to do after God has removed? You may have even accepted that certain people, certain opportunities, and certain paths were not meant for you, but you still need to understand what comes next. Because it's not enough just to let go. You need to move forward. And moving forward means trusting. It means stopping looking back, hoping that something will return. It means stopping the habit of nurturing memories that only hurt you. It means being ready to receive what God truly has for your life. But are you ready? The silence test. When God removes someone from your life, He also allows for a period of silence. It's in that moment that you begin to feel the absence, where your mind tries to deceive you, making you believe that what you lost was essential, that perhaps you've lost something important. But that's the test. God's silence doesn't mean He has abandoned you. It means He's waiting for your decision. Will you run back to what He already took away? Will you try to rebuild connections that have already been severed? Or will you finally open yourself up to the new? This silence may feel lonely, but it is necessary. It's in this silence that you learn to depend more on God and less on people. It's here that you strengthen your identity without needing anyone's validation. Don't try to break this silence forcefully. Don't search for answers where God has already put a period. Trust that, even without an explanation, something better is being prepared. Preparation for what comes next. You may not see it right now, but this distancing is creating space for something much greater. However, God isn't going to hand you something new while you're still attached to what has passed. Before giving you something new, God needs to see that you have truly learned the lesson. He needs to see that you won't repeat the same mistakes, that you won't make space for the same people, that you won't accept less than you deserve. And this preparation requires three things. Closing the right doors. It's not enough to just say you've moved on. You need to cut off access, stop nurturing conversations that no longer make sense, and definitively distance yourself from what's already in the past. Taking care of your mind and heart. Detachment leaves marks, and you need to heal from them. What hurt you cannot define who you will be moving forward. Being ready to receive. God won't give you something new if you're still attached to the old. If you want something greater, you need to act like someone who is already prepared for it. What you've lost doesn't compare to what God is bringing, but He can only deliver it to you when you're ready to hold on. So are you ready? Or do you still need to let go of something else? You've already let go of a lot. You've realized that some people needed to leave your life, that certain opportunities weren't blessings, and that not every separation is a loss. But deep down, there's still one last tie holding you back. That tie isn't a person, it isn't a situation, and it isn't something external. It's your own internal resistance. The problem isn't just letting others go. It's letting go of your need to understand everything, to have immediate answers, to want to control what is no longer in your hands. You say you trust in God, but you still try to question His methods. You know you've been set free, but you still seek justifications. You feel that something better is coming, yet you still look back waiting for a sign that you didn't waste time. But what if I told you that true liberation only happens when you stop seeking explanations and simply accept? Accepting means stopping the process of reliving the past in your mind. It means letting go not only of people, but of the thoughts that keep you tied to them. It means deciding that you no longer need to understand why, because you simply trust in God. Now stop and reflect. Have you truly let go, or are you still emotionally tied to what's left behind? Are you really moving on, or are you just pretending to have gotten over it, while deep down you're still waiting for a return? Do you give everything to God, or do you still want Him to explain every detail before taking action? The answers to these questions will reveal where you stand. The last step, total surrender. God doesn't operate in doubt. He cannot give you what is meant for you if you're still looking back. He can't lead you to the new while you're still holding on to the old. And this is where the last step comes in, total surrender. From now on, you need to decide that you will no longer carry memories that weaken you. Decide that you will no longer seek explanations for what has already happened. Decide that your life is moving forward, and those who were not aligned with your purpose have been left behind, not out of vengeance, not out of pride, but out of self-love, out of respect for God's plan. What God is preparing for you requires space. You need to be free. You need to be ready. You need to be whole. So now let me ask you, are you ready for this total surrender? Or is there still something that needs to be resolved within you? Now it's up to you. Let go, trust, and move forward. Comment, I let go and trust. Subscribe and hit the like button.